pushed open the door to my Cape May beach house, planning to discuss selling the past with my real estate agents, but instead, I found my son-in-law in my very own bed with his mistress. He challenged me to go ahead and tell my daughter, sneering that she was too weak and dependent to ever leave him. He may have been right about my daughter, but he made a fatal mistake. He underestimated her mother. My name is Alice. I'm a 72-year-old retired principal from New Jersey, and this is the story of how a mother's love became a predator's worst nightmare. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe, like, and share this story if it resonates with you. And more importantly, I encourage you to leave your own perspective or story in the comments below, so we can all share and find strength in each other's experiences. You know, the September wind in Cape May always carries a special kind of melancholy. It's lost that sticky, sweltering heat of summer, but it's not yet the bone-chilling cold of winter. It's a wind of transition, a whisper of change, and things that have passed. I felt that deep in my soul as I drove down the Garden State Parkway, leaving the familiar suburbs of North Jersey behind for the shore, where memories were waiting for me, both the sweet and the bitter. Riding shotgun was Jennifer, a young, energetic woman from the real estate agency. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and her high heels tapped a relentless rhythm on the floor mat, as if her own enthusiasm needed an outlet. Next to her in the back was Martin, an older, calmer man with tortoiseshell glasses and a charcoal gray suit. He was the senior partner, the one who brought a sense of trust and experience to the table. For the past hour, they'd been talking nonstop about market potential, coastal property appeal, and staging the space to maximize value. I just nodded and smiled, letting the jargon wash over me. To them, the house in Cape May was an asset, a number on a spreadsheet, a chance to close a lucrative deal. But to me, it was the keeper of the soul of 40 years of my life. "You really have a gem here, Mrs. Walsh," Jennifer said, her voice buzzing with excitement as we turned onto the familiar shore road. "With this location, we can set a premium price, especially with next year's summer rental market in mind. We'll get a professional photographer, maybe even use a drone to capture the full coastline view," Martin added in his deep, reassuring voice. "The key is to show potential buyers the lifestyle they're investing in." Lifestyle. I gave a small, sad smile. The lifestyle of this house was John making coffee in the mornings, the aroma filling our little kitchen. It was Laura's laughter as a toddler, chasing sandpipers on the beach. It was the evenings we'd sit on the porch, watching the sun dip below the ocean in silence, John's hand holding mine. It was a lifestyle that couldn't be priced, couldn't be staged, and certainly couldn't be sold. But memories don't pay off the last of John's medical bills, nor can they fill the emptiness he left behind. At 72, I had to learn to be practical. The car pulled up in front of a 2-story clapboard house, its seafoam green paint beginning to peel from years of salt and wind. A white picket fence enclosed the small garden where the hydrangeas I'd planted years ago still bloomed, defiant and strong. It wasn't grand or modern, but it was sturdy and warm. It was home. "It's charming," Jennifer breathed, her eyes lighting up. "A fresh coat of paint, a few potted plants. It'll look like a postcard." I turned off the engine, taking a deep breath of the salty air. "It holds a lot of stories," I said, more to myself than to them. I fumbled in my purse for the keys, my fingers trembling just a little. It was always like this when I came back here, ever since John passed, a mix of profound nostalgia and a vague dread of facing the silence. This house was too big, too quiet for one person. The sound of the waves, once the soundtrack to our happiness, now sounded like a long, mournful sigh. "Make yourselves at home," I told Jennifer and Martin as I wrestled with the lock, which had stiffened from the sea air. "The master bedroom upstairs has the best view. John always said he wanted to wake up with the ocean." The door creaked open. I braced myself for the wave of stale air, the smell of dust and old wood. But that's not what hit me. The first thing that registered was a strange scent. It wasn't the smell of my house. It was a woman's perfume, cloyingly sweet and foreign, mixed with a man's aftershave, a kind I knew for a fact wasn't John's. The blood in my veins turned to ice. "Is someone staying here, Mrs. Walsh?" Martin asked, his voice low. He'd sensed something was wrong, too. Are you renting it out short-term? I shook my head, my throat suddenly dry as dust. I motioned for them to be still and listened, and then I heard it. It wasn't the wind whistling through the eaves or the gulls crying in the distance. It was voices, whispers, coming from upstairs, a man's low murmur, and then a higher-pitched, feminine giggle. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat signaling danger. Jennifer looked at me, her eyes wide with alarm. "Maybe we should call the police?" she whispered. "No," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "Let me see. This was my house. Whatever was happening up there, I would face it." I gestured for them to stay in the living room and started towards the stairs. Each step I took on the old wooden boards seemed to echo through the silent house. Every creak felt like a betrayal, announcing my presence. The higher I went, the clearer the voices became. The woman's laugh came again, light and carefree. And then, the man's deep laugh in response. A laugh I recognized. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Scott was at a conference in Philadelphia. Laura had told me so. She'd even been complaining about how overworked her husband was. I had to be mistaken. An old woman's mind playing tricks on her. But when my foot landed on the second-floor landing, I knew I wasn't mistaken. The voices were coming from my bedroom, from mine and John's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light cutting through the dark hallway. I crept forward, holding my breath. Through the crack in the door, I could see a portion of the bed. And on it, on the heirloom quilt my own grandmother had stitched for me, were two entangled figures. The man had his back to me, but those broad, athletic shoulders, that perfectly trimmed dark hair, it was unmistakable. It was Scott Crawford, my son-in-law. And the woman beneath him, with platinum blonde hair and red-painted fingernails digging into his scalp, was most certainly not my daughter Laura. "When do you have to be back?" the woman asked, her voice breathy. "Not till Sunday night," Scott replied, the same reassuring tone he used with my daughter now whispering lies into another woman's neck. I told Laura it was an investors' summit in Philly. She never questions my business trips. A cold, sharp anger shot up my spine. It was clean and clear, cutting through the shock and disbelief. Laura was at home in Charleston, probably making the beef stew Scott loved to welcome him back. And here was her husband, in her mother's house, in the very bed her parents had shared for 40 years, defiling it all. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange calm washed over me. I took a deep breath, gathered all the strength in my chest, and shoved the door open. Scott. It was just one word, but it landed with the force of a boulder. The scene that followed would have been comical if it weren't so tragic. Scott jerked up, his face a rapid-fire sequence of expressions: surprise, recognition, and then pure, abject panic. The young woman, who couldn't have been much older than Laura, scrambled to pull my grandmother's quilt over her body, her eyes wide with terror. "Alice, Mrs. Walsh," Scott stammered, grabbing a pillow to cover himself. This isn't what it looks like." "Isn't it?" I crossed my arms, amazed that my voice could be so steady. "Then explain it to me, Scott. Explain why you're in my house, in my bed, with someone who is not my daughter." The other woman was frantically searching for her clothes. I should go," she mumbled. "Stay right where you are," I said, my voice as sharp as a shard of glass. My eyes scanned her face. Young, pretty, and now pale with fear. I'd seen that face somewhere before. In a photo on social media, Scott's company holiday party, Amber, an intern. Scott's shock began to fade, replaced by something uglier, his usual arrogance. "Listen," he said, his voice regaining its false confidence. "This doesn't have to be a big deal. What Laura doesn't know won't hurt her." "Won't hurt her?" I repeated, each word a slice. "My daughter loves you. She trusts you. She defends you every time you're late, makes excuses for every business trip. She's at home waiting for you." "Laura's fine," Scott snapped, yanking on his pants. "She has everything she wants. The house, the car, that insane shopping habit. She's not exactly suffering." The casual cruelty in his voice made my stomach clench. "She wants your love, Scott, your respect, your faithfulness." He laughed. An actual laugh. "Faithfulness? Oh, come on, Alice, this is the 21st century. Laura got comfortable. She stopped trying years ago. He gestured with his head toward the trembling girl behind him. Look at Amber. She appreciates what she has. An invisible line inside me was crossed. Get out, I said, my voice low and full of authority. Both of you, get out of my house. Now. I stood there, a 72-year-old woman in my everyday clothes, but I felt as tall as a giant. Scott looked at me, his arrogance finally wavering in the face of my unshakable resolve. He could manipulate my daughter, but he couldn't manipulate me. He started to get dressed, the silence in the room now thick and heavy. Amber had managed to pull on her dress and was trying to sidle past me towards the door. I stood my ground, blocking her path. What did I say? She flinched, unable to meet my eyes. Finally, Scott was dressed. He approached me, trying to slip back into the condescending tone he used when he thought he had the upper hand. Look, we can be reasonable about this. You're trying to sell this place, right? Laura mentioned your financial situation. Maybe we can work something out. I could help you find a buyer. The offer, the sheer audacity of it, almost made me laugh. He violates my daughter, defiles my home, and now he wants to profit from my hardship. There is nothing to work out, I said. His patience finally snapped. The polished veneer vanished, revealing the real man beneath. Fine, he snarled, his face darkening. Have it your way. Go ahead, tell Laura. See who she chooses. She needs me, you understand? She needs my security, my status, my money. Without me, she's nothing. He paused, a cruel smirk spreading across his face. Go on, you tell her. She needs me more than she'll ever need you. It was a threat, a declaration that he had already won, that my daughter was so completely under his thumb that I, her own mother, was powerless. He thought he had me backed into a corner, but he made a fatal mistake. He didn't corner me, he set me free. Free from any last shred of hesitation, any lingering respect I had for my daughter's marriage. I looked him straight in the eye, a cold calm settling over me. I no longer saw a wayward son-in-law. I saw an enemy. You reap what you sow, Scott, I said, my voice even but carrying a weight he couldn't possibly understand. And your harvest is coming. With that, I turned my back and walked out of the bedroom without a second glance. I left him standing there, in the middle of the chaos he created, with a flicker of confusion just beginning to dawn on his smug face. I didn't go downstairs right away. My feet carried me down the hall to the window that looked out over the beach. The late afternoon sun cast a thin, golden sheen on the white-capped waves that tirelessly crashed ashore. The sound of the surf, which had always brought me such peace, now sounded like a funeral drum, marking the beat of a collapsing illusion. I placed my hand on the cool glass, feeling the slight vibration as a strong gust of wind blew past. I needed a moment for my breathing to return to normal, for the icy rage coursing through my veins not to paralyze me. I needed to think. Behind me, I heard hurried, clumsy sounds. The zip of a fly, the rustle of clothing, the soft pad of bare feet on the wood floor. I didn't need to turn around to picture it. Scott trying to pull his cloak of success and respectability back on, and that young woman, Amber, wishing she could simply disappear into thin air. My silence, my still presence at the end of this hall, was heavier than any accusation. It transformed them from daring lovers into cheap, caught-out adulterers, exposed and pathetic. Finally, I heard Scott's footsteps approaching. He didn't dare walk too quickly. He stopped a few feet behind me. I could feel his eyes on my back. "Alice," he began, his voice stripped of its arrogance, replaced by a strained caution. We need to talk about this, like civilized adults." "There's nothing left to talk about," I replied, my eyes still fixed on the horizon. I said my piece. "Get out of my house." "But Laura?" "Don't you dare speak my daughter's name," I cut in, my voice laced with a dangerous edge for the first time. "You've lost that right." A tense silence hung in the air. I heard him take a breath, maybe to argue, but then he let it out. Perhaps, for the first time in his life, Scott Crawford realized there were some walls he couldn't talk his way through with sweet words or lies. His footsteps retreated, joining the lighter steps of the girl. I heard them go down the stairs, and then the sound of the front door opening and closing in a hurry. They were gone. The house was quiet again, but it was a tainted quiet. The smell of cheap perfume and deceit seemed to linger in the air. I slowly turned, leaning against the windowsill. Now I was truly alone, facing the naked truth. The affair, as painful and disgusting as it was, wasn't the thing that terrified me the most. It was just a symptom. The real disease was in Scott's parting shot, delivered with such vicious confidence. "She needs me more than she'll ever need you." That wasn't a panic defense. It was a statement of fact, a declaration of ownership, and it unlocked a door in my mind, a dark room I'd been willfully ignoring for months, filled with scattered puzzle pieces of worry and doubt. Now, in the harsh light of this reality, I had to step inside and examine every single piece. I made my way slowly down the stairs, my hand gripping the worn wooden banister. Jennifer and Martin were standing in the living room, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Mrs. Walsh, are you all right?" Jennifer asked, her voice full of genuine care. "I'm fine, thank you," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Just a little misunderstanding. Uninvited guests. They've left. I'm sorry to have troubled you both." Martin, the more perceptive of the two, simply nodded. "Not at all, ma'am. We understand. Perhaps we should come back another day." "That won't be necessary," I replied. "I'm not selling the house anymore. The decision came to me as naturally and certainly as breathing. To sell this house now would be like discarding a part of my own soul. No, this house would be my fortress. It would be my war room. Plans have changed. I'm going to keep it. Thank you for your time." They looked surprised but didn't press the issue. After I'd politely shown them out, I bolted the door, a symbolic act. I was sealing myself off from the outside world so I could face the storm brewing within. I sank into the old floral print armchair, John's favorite. The worn fabric under my hands offered a small, fragile comfort. I closed my eyes and began the journey back in time, connecting the dots. The first piece was the phone calls. About 6, maybe 8 months ago, my weekly chats with Laura had started to change. We used to talk for hours about everything under the sun, a book I was reading, a new project she had at her landscape architecture firm, neighborhood gossip. But then, the conversations grew shorter. Laura's voice, normally so bright and full of life, was often shrouded in a kind of weary fog. I remembered one call in particular, about 3 months back. I'd asked her about the herb garden she'd always dreamed of planting. "Oh, Mom, I just don't have time for that stuff," she'd answered, an irritable edge to her voice. "Work is swamped. Scott says I need to focus on what's important." "But you love gardening, honey," I'd said gently. "It helps you relax." "Relax," she'd almost laughed. "You don't get it, Mom. My life isn't as simple as yours was. I have responsibilities. Scott's right. I need to be more realistic." At the time, I just thought she was stressed. The life of a woman nearing 40 is complicated, I told myself. But now, that phrase, "Scott's right," echoed in my head like an alarm bell. How many times had I heard that in recent months? How many of my daughter's own opinions, hobbies, and dreams had been quietly dismissed under the shadow of her husband's judgment? The second piece was Laura's appearance. The last time she visited, a month ago, I was shocked by how she looked. My daughter had always been radiant. Even when tired, her blue eyes had a spark of intelligence and mischief. But the woman who sat across from me that day had dull, lifeless eyes. There were dark circles underneath them, and her normally rosy skin looked sallow. "Are you getting enough sleep?" I'd asked, reaching out to touch her cheek. Laura had flinched, pulling back slightly, a reaction so unlike her. "I'm fine, Mom. Just a lot on my plate." She'd picked up her coffee cup, and I noticed her hands were trembling slightly. She tried to hide it by gripping the mug with both hands. "Scott thinks I might be anemic. He bought me some iron supplements." There he was again. Scott. Always Scott. He had an answer for every problem, a rational explanation for every worrying symptom. He had made himself the gatekeeper, the interpreter of my daughter's own life. He was building an invisible wall between us, a wall plastered with the language of care and concern. I thought back to Thanksgiving last year. I'd made my family recipe pumpkin pie, Laura's absolute favorite since she was a little girl. But when I served it, she only took one small bite before pushing her plate away. "I'm sorry, Mom," she'd said, avoiding my gaze. "I haven't been feeling well. The doctor said I should cut back on sugar." "What doctor?" I'd asked, surprised. "You went to see a doctor?" Before Laura could answer, Scott had chimed in, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Just some routine tests, Alice. The doctor recommended a few dietary changes for stress management. You know how demanding her job is." He'd smiled, a perfect smile, but his eyes didn't. His eyes were sending me a message. This is not your business. Now I wondered, was there ever a doctor? Or was that just another lie, another brick in the wall of my daughter's psychological prison? He was isolating her, not just from me, but from her own simple joys. And then, the final, most disturbing piece clicked into place, the questions about money. Scott was a successful investment fund manager, and at first, I was thrilled my daughter had found such a capable man to provide for her. But over the last year or so, his conversations with me had taken on a different tone. During one dinner, he'd asked, ever so casually, "How's that trust John set up for Laura doing, Alice?" With the market these days, sometimes those older funds need a little restructuring to optimize returns. At the time, I'd told him that Walter, our lawyer and John's best friend, was managing everything just fine. But the question had rubbed me the wrong way. The trust was a private family matter. A few months later, he brought it up again, more directly. "I know you trust Walter, but he's getting on in years. Financial tech is changing by the day. Maybe I should just take a look at the portfolio, just to make sure everything's on the right track." I'd politely but firmly declined, but now I realized it wasn't an offer of help. It was a probe, an attempt to breach the last fortress of my family's security. All of those memories, those seemingly disconnected events, were now swirling in my mind. They weren't fragments anymore. They were fusing together, forming a single, hideous picture, a portrait of systematic manipulation. Scott wasn't just cheating on my daughter, he was dismantling her. He was taking her apart, piece by piece, replacing her confidence with doubt, her joy with fatigue, her connection to me with a dependency on him. He was turning my daughter into a hollow doll, a beautiful shell he could control completely. And the affair? It wasn't just a betrayal, it was an act of supreme contempt. It was his declaration that his project was complete, that Laura was now so weakened and dependent that he could do whatever he wanted without fear of consequence. A silent fury rose in me. It wasn't hot and explosive, but cold, sharp, and focused. It burned away all the grief, all the helplessness. In that moment, the 72-year-old widow struggling with bills and memories disappeared. All that was left was a mother. A lioness who realized her cub was being stalked by a predator in a finely tailored suit. I stood up from the armchair. My hesitation was gone. My purpose was now crystal clear. I wasn't just going to expose Scott's affair. That was merely the tip of the iceberg. I was going to dig deeper, to unearth his entire scheme. I would tear down the wall he'd built around my daughter. I wasn't just going to save Laura. I was going to give my daughter back to herself. I walked over to the telephone on the small table by the window. My hand was no longer shaking. It was steady and sure as I dialed a familiar number. A number I didn't call often, but one I knew would always be answered by a friend. John's friend. A man who would understand the difference between a family problem and a declaration of war. The phone rang once, twice. "Law offices of Walter Hayes," a professional voice answered. "Please put me through to Walter," I said, my voice now devoid of all emotion, replaced by a steely resolve. "Tell him it's Alice Walsh, and it's urgent." "Alice? Are you there? What's going on?" Walter Hayes's voice came through the line, a little surprised but with the same deep, reliable warmth that had been his trademark for 40 years. Walter wasn't just my family's lawyer. He was John's best friend from college, Laura's godfather, an inseparable part of the fabric of our family's history. Hearing his voice right then was like finding a solid anchor in the middle of the storm raging inside me. "Walter, it's me," I replied, my voice holding that strangely calm tone. "Are you alone? I need to talk, and this isn't a conversation for the phone." There was a pause on the other end. Walter was a careful man, a seasoned lawyer used to reading between the lines. The veiled urgency in my calm voice didn't escape him. "I'm at the office, completely private, but if you'd rather, I can be there in a flash." "No," I said firmly. "I'm coming to you. I'm in Cape May. It'll take me about 3 hours. Don't go anywhere." "I'll be waiting," he confirmed, without another question. That was the Walter I knew. Loyal, discreet, and always there when it counted. After hanging up, I didn't waste a second. The hazy, shocked feeling was gone, replaced by a laser-like focus. I walked through the house, not as a nostalgic widow, but as an investigator. I went into the bedroom where the betrayal had happened. The perfume still lingered faintly. The bed had been hastily made, the heirloom quilt bunched up carelessly. I pulled it straight, smoothing out every wrinkle as if trying to erase an invisible stain. My eyes scanned the room, looking for anything out of place, anything left behind. On the nightstand, there was an empty glass with a faint lipstick smudge on the rim. I didn't touch it. I just made a mental note. I went down to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of cold water, and forced myself to drink every drop. I needed to keep my head clear. The fight ahead wasn't going to be a fiery confrontation, but a chess match requiring patience and strategy. Scott was clever. He was cunning. He'd spent years building his scheme. To take him down, I couldn't be emotional. I had to be smarter, more patient, and more ruthless. I locked the house, the keys making a dry, metallic jingle in my hand. Stepping outside, the fresh sea air seemed to wash away some of the suffocating feeling inside. I got in my car, started the engine, and began the long drive north, every mile a step closer to war. For 3 hours, my mind was a whirlwind of activity. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence in the car was the space I needed to arrange the puzzle pieces of my doubt into a coherent indictment. I no longer saw them as isolated incidents, but as calculated moves in a larger game. Laura's personality changes, the hints about finances, her isolation from me, they were all tactics. The affair in Cape May was just the arrogant, premature victory lap of a man who thought the game was already over. He had no idea his real opponent had only just sat down at the board. It was dusk by the time I reached Walter's office in Morristown. The modern office building was mostly empty, only a few windows still lit. Walter's secretary had gone home, but he was waiting for me at the door, his kind face etched with worry. "Alice," he said, his voice low as he saw the look on my face. "Come in." Walter's office was a world away from the cold, corporate gloss of Scott's world. It was warm and lived in, with oak-paneled walls, soft leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with old law tomes. The smell of paper and leather hung in the air. It was the smell of stability, tradition, and the law. He poured me a brandy without asking. His hand was steady as he passed me the glass. "Now," he said, sitting down across from me, "tell me everything, from the beginning." And I did. I recounted the story methodically, factually, trying to strip my own emotions from the narrative. I started with the scene in Cape May, describing Scott's audacity, his final, threatening words. Then I backtracked, telling him about the changes in Laura, the short phone calls, the tired appearance, the repeated, "Scott's right." I told him about Scott's attempts to meddle in our family finances. I presented my observations not as a heartbroken mother, but as a witness giving testimony. I laid each piece of the puzzle on the invisible table between us. Walter listened intently, never once interrupting. His eyes, behind their thick glasses, grew sharper and sharper. His fingers were steepled on his desk, unmoving. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, his gaze distant, as if weighing the gravity of every word. "Does your daughter," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "have any history of psychological issues, Alice? Depression? Anxiety? Anything at all?" The question was a small sting, but I knew he wasn't asking to judge. He was thinking like a lawyer. "Never," I answered firmly. "Laura has always been the strongest person I know. She backpacked through Europe by herself after college. She started her own business from scratch. This fatigue, this irritability, this isn't my daughter." "I didn't think so," Walter nodded. "I've known Laura since she was a baby. What you're describing isn't just stress. It sounds like an erosion." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "A deliberate erosion of her confidence and her judgment." Exactly, I breathed, relieved that someone finally understood. He's weakening her, Walter, and I need to know why. There are two common reasons for this kind of behavior, Walter said, his tone shifting into professional analysis. Money and control. Usually, it's both. He stood up, pacing in front of the window. The affair was reckless. A man as smart as Scott wouldn't take a risk like that unless he believed he was completely safe. He believes Laura will never leave him, no matter what he does. Or worse, he's taken steps to ensure she can't leave him. His words sent a chill down my spine. What do you mean? Walter turned, his face grim. Alice, we have to proceed with extreme caution. Scott is dangerous, not because he's violent, but because he's methodical. If we confront him now, he'll deny everything, manipulate Laura into turning against you, and cover his tracks. We'll lose the element of surprise. So, what do we do? I asked, the brandy in my hand untouched. We investigate him, Walter declared, thoroughly and covertly. I'm going to hire a private investigative team, and I don't mean the kind that snaps photos of cheating spouses. I mean financial and forensic investigators, ex-FBI, the best there is. He laid out the plan. They'll look into everything, Scott's personal finances, his business dealings, his associations. They'll find out if he's in debt, if he's involved in anything illegal. They'll dig into this Amber girl. He paused, looking me straight in the eye. And Alice, I need you to do something very difficult. Anything, I said without hesitation. You have to act as if nothing has changed, he said. Call Laura. Talk to her like you always do. If she mentions you were at Cape May, tell her you just stopped by for a minute and left. Do not let Scott know that you know. Don't let him sense any change in you. To him, you must remain the slightly out of touch, grieving widow who's worried about money. We need him to stay arrogant. We need him to make another mistake. It was the hardest thing he could have asked of me, to pretend ignorance while my heart was screaming for my daughter, to talk to Laura on the phone, to hear the fatigue in her voice and not be able to shout, "You're being poisoned." But I understood the wisdom in Walter's advice. Rage is a powerful weapon, but patience wins the war. I can do that, I promised. Good. Walter nodded, a hint of relief on his face. Now, you let me handle the rest. You go home and get some rest, Alice. You'll need your strength. I'm not going to rest, Walter, I said, setting the untouched brandy on his desk. I'm going to prepare. I left Walter's office close to midnight. The highway was quiet, just the streaks of streetlights passing in the dark. But my mind was no longer in turmoil. In its place was a cold clarity. I had an ally. I had a plan. The chess game had officially begun. When I got home, I didn't go to bed. I went into John's study, a room I had avoided for months. I switched on his old desk lamp, its warm yellow light illuminating his law books, old photographs, and his desktop computer. I sat down in his leather chair, feeling its familiar embrace. I turned on the computer. The password was the same as it had always been, our daughter's name. I'm no technology expert, but I know how to use a search engine. I started with a name, Scott Crawford. I searched everything, his company, news articles, his social media presence. Most of it was carefully polished PR, the successful financier, the devoted husband, the pillar of the community. But then I dug deeper. I searched the names of his business partners, the companies he'd invested in. I searched for complaints, lawsuits, any crack in that perfect facade. And then I searched the second name, Amber Carrington. Her social media was public, a beautiful, ambitious young woman, photos of lavish parties, exotic trips, expensive gifts, a lifestyle that seemed far beyond the reach of an intern's salary. I just kept digging, searching, copying links, taking down names. The night wore on, and as the first rays of dawn crept through the window, I had assembled a dossier of my own. It was incomplete, full of holes, but it was a start. The next few weeks passed in a strange state of outer calm and inner turmoil. To the world, I was still Alice Walsh, a retired school principal, a widow putting her life back together. I went to the grocery store, tended my garden, attended my book club on Wednesdays, but beneath that ordinary veneer, I was a soldier on high alert. Every action, every word was calculated. I was playing a part, and the stage was my own life. The hardest part, just as Walter had warned, was the weekly phone call to Laura. It took all my strength to keep my voice normal, warm, perhaps a little bit preoccupied with the small worries of old age. I asked her about her work, the weather, what movies she'd seen, any trivial topic to fill the space. "Are you doing okay, honey?" I asked during one call, trying to make the question sound casual. "I'm fine, Mom." Laura's voice came back, with that same familiar, tired tone. "Just busy. Scott's been traveling so much for work, he worries about me, always telling me I need to rest." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "It's good that he takes care of you," I managed to say, the words feeling like hot coals in my mouth. "But you need to take care of yourself too. Make sure you're eating well." "Yes, Mom, I know," she said, a trace of impatience in her voice. "Don't worry so much." Every one of those conversations was like a knife in my heart. I could hear the distance in her voice, the invisible wall Scott had erected between us. She didn't confide in me anymore. I wasn't her safe harbor. I had become a worry, a minor annoyance in her carefully curated life. And I had to let it be. I had to play my part, for the sake of the larger goal. While I was struggling with my role, Walter's team was in motion. He called me twice a week, always at the same time in the evening, from a secure burner phone. Those calls were my lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. "They've started on his financials," Walter reported in the first call. "There are massive credit card expenditures, Alice. Luxury hotels in cities where he had no scheduled business. Receipts from high-end jewelry stores, none of which were for Laura." "Amber," I said, the name a cold, hard fact. "Most likely," Walter agreed. "They're also looking at his personal investment accounts. There are some questionable trades. Large sums of money moving in and out of shell corporations in Delaware. It's going to take time to unravel, but where there's smoke, there's fire." In the next call, the news was more sinister. "Alice," the team looked into Amber Carrington. "She's not just an intern. Her father is a small-time real estate developer who's been trying to lobby for a controversial zoning change on a new development. And guess who manages the investment portfolios for a couple of the city council members who have the deciding vote?" "Scott," I whispered, a feeling of disgust rising in my throat. "Exactly," Walter confirmed. "This isn't just a simple affair, it's a network of favors and influence peddling. He's not just cheating on your daughter, he's corrupt." Each new piece of information was like a hammer blow, shattering what was left of the image of the son-in-law I thought I knew. The monster I was facing was far more complex and dangerous than I had first imagined. He wasn't just a cheat, he was a master manipulator, using money, power, and sex as tools to get what he wanted. And then, the confrontation I both dreaded and anticipated finally came. About 3 weeks after the incident at Cape May, Scott called me. "Alice?" "It's Scott." His voice came through the phone, as smooth and polite as if nothing had ever happened. "I'm just calling to see how you're doing. Laura mentioned you've seemed a little distant lately." I took a deep breath, readying myself for the performance. "Oh, Scott, hello, dear. I'm sorry. I've just been a bit tired. Old age, you know." "I understand," he said, his voice full of false sympathy. "That's why I'm calling. Laura and I are worried about you, especially with your finances. I know you decided against selling the Cape May house, and I completely respect that. But I'm concerned that keeping it is putting a strain on you." Here it was, his move. He was testing me, probing to see if I was still easy prey. I'm not sure what to do, Scott," I said, injecting a tremor into my voice. "It's all so complicated. John always handled these things. Now that he's gone, I feel so lost." I know," he jumped in, the eagerness in his voice barely concealed. "That's why I want to help. This weekend, Laura and I would like to come over. We can sit down, go over everything. I can look at your papers, make a few suggestions. No pressure at all. Just family helping family." The offer, wrapped in the language of concern, was a declaration of war. He wanted inside my house. He wanted to see my financial documents. He wanted to find my weakness so he could move in for the kill. "Oh, that would be wonderful, Scott," I said, my voice full of gratitude. "You are such a thoughtful son-in-law." "Not at all, Alice. Family takes care of each other," he said, the smugness practically radiating through the phone. After I hung up, I immediately called Walter. "He's coming," I said, no preamble needed. "This weekend, he wants to see my papers." "Excellent," Walter replied, not sounding surprised at all. "The plan is working. This is our chance, Alice, but we have to be ready." For the rest of that week, Walter and I worked tirelessly. He came to my house in the evenings, bringing thick folders with him. We didn't just prepare my real financial documents, we created a trap. Walter drafted a set of dummy files, complete with doctored financial statements, showing John's trust performing much worse than it actually was. We threw in a few fake letters from the bank, warning of overdue mortgage payments on the Cape May house. The goal was to paint a picture of a woman in real trouble, a woman on the verge of desperation, ready to clutch at any offer of help. We had to show Scott exactly what he wanted to see. Walter also brought something else, a small brooch in the shape of a dragonfly made of silver. "This isn't just a gift, Alice," he said, placing it in my palm. "It has a high-fidelity microphone inside. The sound quality is excellent. When Scott comes, wear this. We need to record every word he says." Holding the brooch, I felt its weight. This had all become very real. I was no longer an observer. I was a spy in my own home. Sunday arrived, a beautiful autumn day with golden sunlight and a cloudless blue sky. A perfect day for a family reunion, or an ambush. I spent the morning preparing. I baked an apple pie, Laura's favorite, so the house would smell warm and welcoming. I wore an old cardigan, slightly frayed at the elbows. And I pinned the dragonfly brooch to my collar. When the doorbell rang, my heart skipped a beat. I took a deep breath, put on the smile of a happy mother and grandmother, and went to open the door. Laura stood there, looking as pale and tired as ever. She smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. Beside her stood Scott, tall and handsome, in a navy blue cashmere sweater. He gave me a hug, a hollow, performative gesture. "You look great, Alice," he said, his eyes scanning me, assessing. "Come in, you two," I said cheerfully. "The apple pie is almost ready." Lunch was a tense, clumsily veiled affair. Laura barely touched her food, just pushed a salad around her plate. Scott, on the other hand, was talkative, telling bland jokes, asking about neighbors he couldn't care less about. He was performing, playing the part of the perfect son-in-law. And I played my part, laughing at the right moments, nodding in the right places. Finally, after the plates were cleared, the moment came. "So, Alice," Scott began, settling into the armchair across from me. "If you don't mind, maybe now we could take a look at some of those papers. I just want to get an overview so I know how I can help." "Oh, of course, dear," I said, getting up. "Let me get them. They're in John's study." I walked into the study, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. The curtain was going up. I retrieved the dummy file Walter and I had prepared and placed it on the coffee table in front of Scott. "It's all in here," I said, with a plausible manufactured tremor in my voice. "To be honest, I don't understand half of it." Scott picked up the folder, his eyes lighting up with an eagerness he tried to conceal. He began flipping through the pages, his face a mask of professional concentration. But I could see the satisfaction creeping into his eyes as he saw the losses, the warning letters. The living room fell silent. The only sound, the rustle of paper as Scott went through the file I'd given him. Laura sat on the sofa, staring blankly out the window, seemingly lost in a world of her own. Her presence, her listlessness, both broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. She was the reason I was doing this. All of it was for her. I sat in the chair opposite Scott, my hands clasped in my lap to keep them from shaking. I watched him. I watched the way his eyes narrowed as he examined a number, the way the corner of his mouth twitched into a tiny smirk as he read a fake warning letter from the bank. He was savoring his role, the role of the savior, the brilliant man of finance swooping in to rescue his helpless, pathetic mother-in-law. He had no idea he was the one walking into a meticulously laid trap. The dragonfly on my sweater felt like a tiny soldier, silently recording every word, every breath. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 15 minutes, Scott closed the folder and placed it on the table with a decisive thud. He let out a long sigh, a carefully rehearsed sound meant to convey sympathy and a touch of concern. "Well, Alice," he began, his voice low and full of care, "the situation is a little worse than I thought." "Is it?" I asked, managing to sound alarmed. "How bad?" "I don't want to frighten you," he said, leaning forward and placing a comforting hand on my arm. His skin was cold. "But to be blunt, if you don't act quickly, you could lose everything." I instinctively pulled my arm back. "Lose everything? Even this house?" "The Cape May house is definitely the first to go," he said, nodding gravely. "The mortgage payments are seriously behind. And the trust John left, well, I'm afraid Walter might be a fine lawyer, but he's not an aggressive investor for a modern market. This portfolio is horribly outdated. It's bleeding money." Every word he spoke was a lie built on the fake foundation we had created. But the way he said them, the confidence, the condescension veiled by concern, it sent a shiver down my spine. He truly believed he was the smartest person in the room. "Oh my goodness," I said, bringing a hand to my mouth. What am I going to do, Scott? I can't lose the Cape May house. It's all I have left of John." I know," he soothed, "and that's why I'm here. We're gonna fix this." He leaned back, crossing his arms, shifting into the posture of a financial guru about to unveil a brilliant solution. "We have a couple of options. The first, and the worst, is to sell the Cape May house immediately. But with the bank breathing down your neck, you'll have to sell it for a song, and that money will only cover your immediate debts." He paused, letting the desperation sink in. "The second option," he continued, his voice dropping as if he were letting me in on a secret, "is a complete restructuring. We need to liquidate this old, tired portfolio and move all the assets into something more aggressive, more agile, something that I can personally manage and oversee." There it was. His end game, gaining control of my family's entire fortune. "But Walter," I hesitated, "he's managed it for all these years." "And that's the problem, Alice," Scott interrupted, a note of impatience in his voice. "He's managed it the way it was done years ago. The market is a different beast now. You need someone who understands it, someone who can protect and grow what John left you." He looked at me, his eyes shining with false sincerity. "You need someone in the family you can trust." Just then, Laura, who had been silent the whole time, spoke up. "Scott's right, Mom," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "He knows what he's talking about. You should listen to him." Her words hit me like a physical blow, not because of what she said, but how she said it. She spoke like a robot, repeating a pre-programmed message. Scott didn't even have to look at her. He had already installed the response in her head. I turned to my daughter. "Laura, are you sure? This is a huge decision." "I'm sure," she replied, but her eyes were on the floor. "Scott will take care of us. He always does." The despair almost overwhelmed me. I wanted to scream, to grab her by the shoulders and shake her until she woke up. But I couldn't. I had to see this through. I turned back to Scott. "So, what do I have to do?" I asked, my voice now genuinely trembling with a mixture of rage and grief. "It's very simple," Scott said, a triumphant little smile playing on his lips. "You just need to sign a few papers. A power of attorney, allowing me to act on your behalf with the banks and brokerage firms. We'll transfer all the assets into a new account managed by my firm. It will be completely transparent. You'll get monthly statements." "Transparent?" The word sounded like a sick joke coming from his mouth. "I actually took the liberty of preparing some documents for you to look at," he said, reaching down for a leather briefcase by his chair. He pulled out a thick sheaf of papers, neatly stapled. "These are just drafts, of course, so you can see what it entails. You can have your lawyer look them over if you like." He said it with such confidence, knowing full well that a panicked old woman like me would never bother a lawyer. He expected me to sign on the spot, overwhelmed with gratitude and trust. I took the papers, my hands feigning a tremor. I glanced at the dense legal jargon, the columns of numbers. I didn't need to read it to know what it was. It was the rope he planned to hang me with. "It looks so complicated," I said, pushing my glasses up my nose. "Don't worry, I'll walk you through every line," he said, his voice patient. but I could see the impatience in the way he tapped his fingers on the arm of the chair. He wanted this over with. And then, I decided it was time to push him a little further. It was time to see just how cruel this monster could be. "Scott," I began, looking up at him, my eyes welling with tears. "There's something else. Something I haven't told anyone, not even Laura." Both Scott and Laura looked at me. I had their full attention. "John, before he died, he left something else," I said in a hushed voice. "It wasn't in the trust. Something more private. A life insurance policy. One he'd been secretly paying into for years. It's substantial." I could practically see Scott's pupils dilate. He was trying to keep his expression neutral, but greed is a hard emotion to hide. "Substantial? How substantial, Alice?" I took a breath. $500,000, I lied, point blank. The air in the room seemed to stop. Even Laura looked shocked. "And it's a cash payout," I continued. "The money is just sitting in a separate savings account. I haven't known what to do with it. I've been scared. Scared of making the wrong decision." I looked him right in the eye, a lamb offering itself to the wolf. Maybe you should manage that money for me too? Make it grow. For Laura's future?" It was the kill shot. I hadn't just offered him the chicken. I had shown him the whole golden hen house. Scott could barely contain himself. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his professional composure. "Of course, Alice. That would be a very wise decision. Letting a sum that large sit in a savings account is a terrible waste. We could invest it and create a steady stream of income for you, and a wonderful legacy for Laura." "A legacy," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "So, how would we do that?" I asked, all innocence. "I'll just add it to the restructuring plan," he said quickly. "You'll just need to give me the account information. I'll handle all the transfer paperwork. It'll all be consolidated. Much easier to manage." He got up and paced the room, his energy now palpable. He was thinking about the $500,000. He was already spending it. "This is wonderful, Alice," he said, turning back with a brilliant smile. "In just a few weeks, all of your financial worries will be over. You can finally relax and enjoy your retirement, knowing everything is taken care of." He glanced at Laura, who was still sitting silently, and gave her a wink. "And we can start planning that big vacation. What do you say, honey? How about a trip to Italy?" Laura looked up, a faint ghost of a smile on her lips. "Yeah, that sounds nice." I looked at the two of them, the manipulator and his unknowing victim, and I felt a profound sadness mixed with a cold fury. He wasn't just going to steal my money. He was stealing my daughter's soul, buying it with promises of lavish trips funded by her own father's legacy. I had everything I needed. His words, captured by the tiny dragonfly on my sweater, were a full confession of his intent to commit fraud. "Well then," I said, getting to my feet, holding the stack of papers. I'll read these over. I need some time to think." Disappointment flashed across Scott's face, but he quickly masked it with an understanding smile. "Of course, Alice. Take your time, but don't take too long. The market waits for no one." "I know," I said. "Thank you, Scott. Thank you for everything." As I walked them to the door, Scott hugged me again. "Don't you worry, Alice," he whispered in my ear. "It's all going to be okay. I won't let you down." "I trust you," I whispered back, and it was the biggest lie I had ever told in my life. I stood at the door and watched their car drive away until it disappeared around the corner. Then I closed the door, slid the deadbolt home, and leaned against it, finally letting out a long, shuddering breath. The performance was over, and I hadn't just survived. I had won. I unpinned the brooch, holding it in the palm of my hand. Such a small thing, but it held the power to destroy an empire of lies. I walked into the study and called Walter. "Walter," I said when he picked up. "It's done." He took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. I told Walter on the phone, my voice now stripped of any tremor, replaced by a cold finality. "He believes I'm a broke, desperate old widow. He thinks he's about to get everything." I could hear Walter let out a long breath on the other end of the line. "You did well, Alice. Better than I ever could have hoped. The recording is perfect. It gives us clear intent to defraud. We can use it to file a civil suit, freeze his assets, and protect the trust immediately." "No." I cut him off, a decision that had crystallized in my mind the moment Scott drove away. Civil isn't enough. Alice, what are you talking about? Walter's voice held a note of concern. I'm talking about crimes, Walter, I replied, looking out the study window as darkness began to fall. He isn't just a con man. He's a thief. He's embezzled. He's taken bribes. And God only knows what else he's done. I don't just want my money back. I want him to pay for what he's done to Laura. I want him in prison. There was a long silence. I knew I was asking for something huge. To take this from a family dispute to a criminal case was a massive step. It would bring everything into the public eye. It would involve the media. And most of all, it would cause unimaginable pain for Laura, at least at first. Are you sure about this? Walter finally asked, his voice low and serious. Once we go down this road, there's no turning back. It's going to get very, very ugly. It's already ugly, Walter, I said. My daughter just doesn't know it yet, and I would rather she face a horrifying truth than continue to live a comfortable lie that is slowly killing her. We have to go all the way. Walter didn't argue further. He knew the resolve in my voice. All right, Alice, if this is what you want, I'm with you. But to make this a criminal case, we need more than a recording of intent to defraud. We need undeniable proof of crimes already committed. We need the smoking gun. Then we'll go find it, I declared. Our next meeting took place the following evening, not at my house or Walter's office, but in a neutral, secure location. A private meeting room at the back of the town library where John had once served on the board. There, we met with the head of the private investigation team, a man named David Chen, a former FBI agent with sharp eyes and a quiet demeanor. David spread files across the large oak table. Mr. Hayes is right, Mrs. Walsh, he began, his voice calm and professional. Your recording is excellent supporting evidence, but to get federal prosecutors involved, we need physical proof of embezzlement. He pointed to a complex diagram on a piece of paper. We've been tracing Crawford's financial trails. He's sophisticated. He set up a series of shell corporations, moving money between them to launder it and hide its origins. We believe the embezzlement starts with the investment fund he manages, but to prove it, we need access to his company's internal servers, or his personal computer. That's impossible, Walter interjected. We don't have a warrant. Exactly, David said, his eyes shifting to me, which is why we need someone who can get inside. The room fell silent. I knew who he was talking about. Absolutely not, Walter protested immediately. I will not have Alice putting herself in that kind of danger. No way. Mr. Hayes, I understand your concern, David said respectfully, but Mrs. Walsh is the only person Crawford trusts right now. She's our only key. We wouldn't ask her to do anything complicated. We just need her to create an opportunity. A few minutes. That's all we'd need. I looked at David, then at Walter. I was touched by Walter's protectiveness, but I knew David was right. I couldn't stand on the sidelines and let other people fight this battle for me anymore. What do you need me to do? I asked David, my voice steady. David explained the plan. He handed me what looked like an ordinary USB flash drive. This is a data cloning device. You just need to plug it into Crawford's computer. It will run automatically, copy key files, emails, and browser histories without leaving a trace. The whole process takes about 5 minutes. 5 minutes, I repeated. In a house with Scott and Laura, 5 minutes could feel like a lifetime. How am I supposed to get 5 minutes alone with his computer? That's the part you'll have to figure out, David said. You know their routines better than anyone. An excuse. Ask Laura for help with something in the kitchen. Create a fake phone call to draw Scott out. Walter was still hesitant, his face a mask of disapproval. It's too risky. What if he catches you? He won't catch me, I said, and the confidence I felt wasn't a bluff. Because he's too arrogant. He thinks he has me completely under his thumb. His smugness is his biggest blind spot, and I'm going to use it. I looked at Walter. Walter, what would John do in this situation? Would he hide in his law office and wait? Or would he go out there and fight for justice? You know the answer. The mention of John did the trick. Walter sighed, finally giving a reluctant nod. All right, but you have to promise me, Alice. If anything feels even slightly wrong, you walk away. Immediately. No evidence is worth your safety. I promise, I said. My chance came sooner than I expected. 2 days later, Laura called, her voice sounding a little more cheerful than usual. Mom, it's Scott's birthday this weekend. I'm planning a little surprise party for him at the house. Just a few close friends. Can you come help me get ready? I want to make his favorite carrot cake, but I can't remember your recipe. It was a sign. An invitation into the lion's den. A perfect opportunity. Of course, sweetheart, I replied, trying to keep the eagerness out of my voice. I'll be there Saturday morning. On Saturday, I arrived at their house with a basket full of baking supplies and the dangerous USB drive hidden deep in my coat pocket. Their home, a modern mansion in a wealthy suburb, was beautiful and immaculate, a cold kind of perfection. Scott wasn't home. Laura said his friends had kidnapped him for a surprise round of golf. We have the whole morning to get everything ready, she said, pulling me into the kitchen. Their kitchen looked like a showroom, all stainless steel and gleaming granite countertops. But as we started on the cake, I noticed how clumsy Laura was. She dropped an egg, measured the flour wrong. Her hands trembled slightly, and she had to reread the recipe over and over. This wasn't the Laura I knew, the daughter who could once cook a gourmet meal for 10 people without a cookbook in sight. Are you all right, honey? I asked gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. Laura started. I'm fine. Just, my head's been a little foggy lately. Scott says I'm probably just overworked. Always Scott, always that excuse. I swallowed my anger and smiled. Well, let me give you a hand. Why don't you go out to the back garden and pick some fresh mint leaves to decorate the cake? The fresh air will do you good. That's a good idea, Laura agreed and headed for the back door. This was it. My opening. My heart was hammering. I knew I only had minutes. I glanced out the window and saw Laura wandering among the flower beds. I slipped out of the kitchen and made my way to Scott's study, where I knew he kept his laptop. The door was unlocked. The room was minimalist and expensive. Everything was in perfect order. The MacBook Pro was on the desk, in sleep mode. I quickly opened it. Luckily, it didn't require a password. His arrogance, again, was my ally. My hands trembling, I pulled the USB drive from my pocket. My fingers fumbled as I plugged it into the port. A small green light on the device began to blink. The copy process had started. 1 minute. I stood there, every muscle tensed, listening for any sound. The ticking of the clock on the wall sounded like a time bomb. 2 minutes. I heard the back door open. Mom, I got a whole bunch, Laura's voice called from the kitchen. My heart stopped. That's wonderful, dear. Just wash them and leave them on the counter for me. I called back, trying to keep my voice from shaking. 3 minutes. I glanced at the screen. A tiny progress bar was crawling across a hidden command window. It was so slow, torturously slow. 4 minutes. Do you need any more help? Laura asked, her footsteps getting closer. No, honey, I'm almost done. Just looking for an apron in this drawer. I lied, my voice an octave higher than normal. I looked at the screen again. The progress bar was almost full. 90%, 95%. I heard the handle on the study door begin to turn. Just then, the green light on the USB drive stopped blinking and went dark, complete. The instant Laura stepped into the room, I had pulled out the USB drive, shoved it in my pocket, and slammed the desk drawer shut. I turned to face her, my heart beating like a drum solo. Couldn't find one, I said with a weak smile. Oh well, let's get back to that cake. Laura gave me a strange look for a second, as if she sensed something was off, but then the fog in her eyes returned. Okay. When we got back to the kitchen, I had to lean against the counter for a moment to steady myself. My hands were still shaking. I'd done it. I had walked into the lion's den and walked out with his secrets. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I don't remember mixing the batter or frosting the cake. My mind was entirely focused on the tiny, powerful flash drive safe in my pocket. It was a time bomb, and I had just lit the fuse. When I drove home that afternoon, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a terrifying weight. I had deceived my own daughter, used her trust to commit a dangerous act. I had crossed a line I never thought I would cross. I drove to a quiet park in a neighboring town where I had arranged to meet David Chen. I didn't want to bring that ticking bomb into my own house. I wanted it in the hands of people who knew what to do with it, immediately. David was waiting on a bench, looking like any other man enjoying the autumn air, but his eyes never stopped scanning. He stood as I approached. "You have it?" he asked, forgoing any greeting. I said nothing, just quietly handed him the USB drive. He took it, his professional hands deftly wrapping it in a handkerchief before tucking it into his jacket pocket. "You did great, Mrs. Walsh. We'll take it from here. Now you go home. We'll be in touch as soon as we have anything." The meeting lasted less than a minute, but its intensity left me exhausted. When I got home, I poured myself a cup of tea, but I couldn't drink it. I just sat there, in my quiet kitchen, and waited. The waiting was its own form of torture. Every car that passed, every time the phone rang, I jumped. I had lit the fuse. Now all I could do was wait for the explosion. The call came at nearly 10 o'clock that night. It was Walter. His voice was different. The usual calm, measured tone was gone. In its place was a taut, barely concealed rage. "Alice," he said, his voice hoarse, "are you sitting down?" "I am," I replied, my heart clenching. "What is it, Walter? What did you find?" "We found everything," he said. David and his team decrypted the data. "It's worse, so much worse than anything we could have imagined." He took a deep breath. "On the financial side, it's just as we suspected. He's embezzled about $1.8 million over 3 years. He created fake clients, forged profit reports, and funneled the money to offshore accounts. The plan to drain John's trust is all there in emails with a rival firm. This alone is enough to put him away for at least 10 years. "But that's not the worst part, is it?" I asked, a cold dread creeping up my spine. Walter was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with disgust. "No, it's not. Alice." On his computer, we found a heavily encrypted folder. It took David's team hours to crack it. Inside was a journal. A journal? Not a journal of events, more like a manifesto, a plan. He writes about his resentment, Alice. He writes about feeling looked down upon when he first met Laura, how he felt our family, John's legacy, was always judging him. He called himself the pauper prince who had to marry the ice princess. I closed my eyes, Walter's words feeling like physical blows. "He planned all of it right from the start," Walter continued, his voice shaking with anger. "The marriage wasn't a mistake, it was a strategy. He wanted revenge. His plan wasn't just to take the money. He wanted to destroy everything John had built. He wanted to destroy you, and he wanted to destroy Laura, methodically." "Destroy Laura," I repeated, my throat tight. "Yes, and we found how he was doing it. He had a separate folder labeled L's Health. Inside was a detailed browser history. He'd been researching the effects of psychotropic drugs, anti-anxiety medications, sleeping pills, antidepressants. He researched how to combine them to induce symptoms like memory loss, confusion, chronic fatigue, and emotional dependency. He looked up drugs that were odorless, tasteless, and easily dissolved in drinks. I could hardly breathe. Oh my God, the tea, her nightly herbal tea. "Yes, Alice." Walter's voice was full of pain. "We found online payment receipts from pharmacies in Canada and Mexico for these exact drugs, purchased under a fake name. He has been systematically poisoning your daughter for months. He made her sick, and then he played the part of the doctor, the caregiver, the only one she could trust. He did it so that when he made his final move, when he took everything, she would be so mentally broken, so legally incompetent to fight him, that everyone would just believe she had always been unstable." I let the phone slip from my hand onto the desk. The room was spinning. The truth was too monstrous, too depraved. It was beyond any normal boundary of betrayal. This wasn't the act of a con man. This was the act of a monster, a cold-blooded psychopath in the guise of a husband and a son-in-law. I dropped my head to the table, my hands covering it. A sob tore from my chest. It was not a cry of weakness, but the roar of a cornered animal. The pain for Laura, the horror at Scott's evil, and the rage at myself for not seeing it sooner, it all coalesced into a tidal wave of emotion that crashed over me. I had let my daughter live with a demon. I had let her be poisoned, manipulated, right under my nose. After a few minutes, I regained my composure. The pain didn't go away, but it crystallized into something else. A diamond of pure hatred, hard and sharp. I picked up the phone. Walter was still there, waiting silently. "Walter," I said, my voice now holding no warmth at all. "What's the plan?" "David has backed up all the evidence. He's preparing a full report for the U.S. Attorney's Office first thing Monday morning," Walter explained. "They'll have more than enough to get an immediate arrest and search warrant. He won't be able to deny any of it." "Good," I said, "but before they arrest him, there's something I have to do." "Alice, no," Walter said instantly. "You've done enough. Let the law handle it now. You are not to go near him again. He's far more dangerous than we ever thought." "I'm not going to him," I said. "I'm going to my daughter. I have to get her out of there, Walter. Tonight. Now. I will not let her spend another night under his roof, drink another cup of his poison. Do you understand?" "I understand, but—" "No buts." I cut him off. "I won't confront Scott. I won't reveal a thing. I will go there, make up an excuse, and I will bring Laura back to my house. Just the two of us. Once she is safe here, you can have him arrested. Those are my terms." Walter sighed. He knew he couldn't stop me. "All right, Alice, but you have to promise me you will be incredibly careful. Don't do anything to arouse his suspicion." "I won't," I said. "I've been playing a part for weeks. I can play it one last time." After we hung up, I wasted no time. I went upstairs to Laura's old room, the one she'd had since she was a little girl. Everything was still the same. Her favorite books, her pictures from school, her framed architect's license. I opened her closet and pulled out a few of my own comfortable clothes that I knew would fit her. I made her bed, changing the sheets to a fresh, clean-smelling cotton set. I was preparing a sanctuary, a safe haven for my daughter to come home to after she escaped from hell. I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight, too late to drive over there now, but I would go first thing in the morning. I would get there before Scott could make her his morning cup of tea. I sat on the edge of Laura's bed, in her childhood room, and I prayed. I'm not a religious woman, but that night, I prayed with every fiber of my being. I prayed for the strength to face the morning. I prayed for my daughter's safety, and I prayed that, after this storm had passed, I could help her find her way back to herself, back to the light. The Sunday dawn didn't break with a gentle light, but with a cold, silver-gray hue, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. I hadn't slept a wink. I'd sat in the chair in John's study, staring out the window, waiting for the first streaks of light that would make it safe to drive. In my hand was a cup of stone-cold tea. I'd made it hours ago, but hadn't touched it. I couldn't stomach anything. My entire being was a machine wound tight for a single purpose, to get Laura out of that house. As I drove along the quiet, early morning highways, the world seemed blurry. The trees, the houses, the other cars passed like ghosts. My mind was completely focused. I rehearsed the plan in my head, going over my lines, preparing for every possible contingency. How did I need to appear? Worried, but not panicked. Frail, but not suspicious. I had to be Alice Walsh, the lonely widow who needed her daughter, a role I'd been practicing for weeks. Only this time, there was no room for error. I arrived in their suburb just as the sun cleared the horizon, tinting the clouds pink. The million-dollar homes were silent, their perfectly manicured lawns still wet with dew. Everything radiated a false sense of order and peace. Laura and Scott's house stood out, a modern architectural statement with huge glass windows and sharp angles. It looked cold and sterile, like a luxurious glass cage. I parked on the street, not in their driveway. I needed this to look spontaneous. I took out the wicker basket I'd prepared, filled with fresh croissants from the local bakery and a thermos of hot coffee. A peace offering, a mother's perfect excuse. I walked up the stone steps, my heart hammering against my ribs. I took a deep, steadying breath and rang the bell. The chime echoed, cutting through the morning silence. I waited, each second stretching into an eternity. The door opened. It was Scott. He was wearing a charcoal-colored silk robe, his hair still slightly mussed from sleep. He looked tired and a little annoyed at being woken up. But when he saw me, the annoyance was quickly masked by a practiced, social smile. "Alice, what is it? What are you doing here so early?" "Oh, Scott, I'm so sorry," I said, my voice intentionally trembling. I held up the basket. I couldn't sleep, just tossing and turning. I thought I'd bring breakfast over for you two. I know you both had a long day yesterday. Scott's eyes flickered from me to the basket. He was assessing the situation. "That's very thoughtful of you, Alice, but you really didn't have to. Please come in." He opened the door wider. As I stepped over the threshold, I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move. The house was cold and silent. "Laura's still asleep," he said, closing the door. "Last night's party was pretty lively." "I won't wake her," I replied. "I should probably just go." I made a show of turning to leave. No, you're already here," he said quickly, stopping me, just as I knew he would. He didn't want any erratic behavior from me. Everything had to be under his control. "Have a seat. Let me get you some tea." Tea. The offer sent a jolt of ice through my veins. "No, thank you, dear. I have coffee right here," I said quickly, setting the basket on the kitchen island. "You go ahead. I'll just sit in the living room." I walked into the living room and sat on the sofa, placing my handbag beside me. I needed to control the space. Scott disappeared into the kitchen, and I heard the sound of running water, the clink of a mug. He was making tea for himself. A few minutes later, he returned with a steaming cup. He sat in the armchair across from me, crossing his legs, the picture of casual ease. "So, what's really on your mind?" he asked, taking a sip. "Is it about those papers we looked at last week?" "That's part of it," I lied, looking down at my clasped hands. "It's just all so overwhelming." I looked up at him, my eyes welling with tears. It was time for the main performance. "Scott, last night, I had a dream about John." Scott's expression didn't change, but I saw him lean forward slightly, intrigued. "It was so vivid," I continued, my voice breaking. "We were walking on the beach in Cape May, just like we used to. He didn't say anything, he just held my hand and looked at me. But in his eyes, I could see. He was worried about me, and worried about Laura." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Scott remained silent, waiting. "When I woke up," I said, a real tear of rage and pain now tracing a path down my cheek, "I had this overwhelming urge, a feeling I can't explain. I need to go to the house in Cape May, today. I need to be there alone, to feel his presence again, to find some peace." Scott's brow furrowed. This was a development he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't about money, it wasn't something he could control with logic. "Alice, it was just a dream," he said in a placating tone. "You're probably just stressed. Why don't you stay here for the day? We can all have lunch together." "No, you don't understand," I said, shaking my head firmly. "This is something I have to do, for John, and for myself." I looked him straight in the eye. "And I don't want to go alone. I want Laura to come with me, just the two of us, just for the day." Alarm bells were clearly going off in Scott's head. He didn't want Laura out of his sight, especially not with me. "Laura's exhausted from the party," he said, grasping for an excuse. "And she has some projects she needs to finish. Maybe next weekend would be better." "No, it has to be today," I insisted, my voice becoming pleading. "Please, Scott, this is so important to me, just for a few hours. Surely her work can wait. Please." Just then, Laura appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a dressing gown. Her hair was a mess, her face gaunt. "What's all the noise?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "Nothing, honey," Scott said quickly, getting up. "Your mom just stopped by. Go on back to bed." "No," I said, standing up too, looking past her gatekeeper directly at my daughter. "Laura, honey, I need you." I walked to the bottom of the stairs, looking up at her. I had a dream about your father," I said, repeating my story, but this time with all the genuine emotion of a grieving wife and a desperate mother. "And I have to go to Cape May right now. Will you come with me?" "He would want you to come with me. Please, sweetie." Laura looked at me, then at Scott. Her face was a canvas of confusion. The mention of her father, the dream. My plea, it seemed to have touched something deep inside her, something that pierced through the medicinal fog. "She's not going anywhere," Scott said flatly, but he was speaking to me, not to her. "She needs to rest." "Do you want to go, Laura?" I asked, ignoring Scott completely. "Just you and me, like old times." Laura hesitated. I could see a battle being waged in her clouded eyes. A flicker of her true self was trying to break through. I don't know." "Laura, I said you need to rest," Scott repeated, and this time his voice had an undercurrent of command. "Listen to me. It was a mistake." That command, that naked display of control, seemed to do what all my pleading couldn't. It made Laura think. She looked down at her mother, standing at the bottom of the stairs with tears in her eyes, and then back at her husband, who was ordering her around. And in a rare moment of clarity, she made a choice. "Just for a little while," Laura said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'll go with Mom. Give me a minute to get dressed." And with that, she turned and disappeared into the bedroom before Scott could react. Scott turned to look at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of genuine panic in his eyes. He had lost control. "What did you do?" he hissed, his voice a low, furious whisper. "I just wanted to be with my daughter," I replied innocently, but my eyes